Hello and welcome to this conversation between myself, Chris, and Ollie Richards, Chief Marketing Officer, New Business Guru and IPA Group member. 3 things I loved about this conversation. One was the detail we got into on the pitch process, how to do it well, how to do it unsustainably, and contrasting not just the mental health side of being in the office for a pitch at 2 a.m. and then getting back at 8 a.m. the next day versus a more sustainable way of doing it, but actually also the performance side and the marginal gains that can be made in how that pitch lands and ultimately whether a client is won or lost. So the performance and mental health side of the pitch process was number 1. Number 2 actually is, although it sounds really simple, the communication piece. And you could expect that someone like Ollie, for example, who's CMO, would talk about communication, not just from a PR point of view, but actually when it comes to line management responsibilities. But he really went into depth on some examples and tools and tactics that he's used previously to boost communication with his teammates and the wider business. And then third and finally, I think the idea that actually as senior leaders and leaders, we're people too. As much as we might be responsible for the well-being and mental health of others to an extent, actually one of the best things that we can do as senior leaders is make sure that we're looking after ourselves. So a few simple tips on how to do that as well, from the perspective of a new business expert whose role is very much driven by performance ultimately. Those are my takeaways. I'll leave you to enjoy and decide what you want to get from it yourself. Thank you very much. Enjoy. Ollie, thank you so much for joining me. I wonder, to kick us off, if you could just share a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Ollie Richards. I'm responsible for growth and reputation, so effectively driving growth for new clients and pushing the reputation of the business. I'd say I'm like a new business and marketing lifer, is what I've done. In fact, that's how we met, Chris. We met when we were at Engine together. So I spent some time at Engine doing sports marketing, spent a good swathe of time at Dentsu. So yeah, I guess this whole topic of mental health and performance is like it's something that I've seen a lot, and it has quite real ramifications for me in my job and my ability to drive both growth and reputation.
Well, that's something I'd love to dive into, to be honest, Ollie. So in your experience leading pitches, building relationships, driving business and commercial side of things, how do you see the link between mental health and performance?
Well, I think pitching especially, which is sort of the real, it's the coalface of winning new clients. They're won and lost on fine margins. And the only thing you have in my line of work, the only thing you're really selling is people. And if those people are at peak performance, so, they're able to put their best foot forward in the meeting, they are feeling good, they're feeling positive, they've had time and space to think about what they're presenting, all that stuff that goes along with it, you're more likely to win. I think at its worst, when people are not performing well, there is a problem mentally. They are probably don't have a lot of resilience left in the tank. And I think that's when you go into situations and people don't put their best foot forward. Because frankly, that someone else somewhere, one of the other agencies on the list or one of the other competitors will have people that are doing that, and will have people that have that are at their best and performing at their best on that day.
I love that. I love the tangible nature of the pitch. It's just quite an obvious thing that we can imagine, isn't it? So, and you've obviously had a very key role in a lot of them over your career. So it sounds like definitely the distinction between people running on fumes versus really at peak performance is key. And that's literally the difference and fine margin between winning or losing a key account. So I'm interested to dig into that in a moment. But first, perhaps, obviously, you've played a role in a lot of these pitches too. So from your own personal experience with regards to mental health and performance, have you faced any challenges over your time?
Yeah, definitely. I would say pitching generally has got a lot better, without a doubt. I think when I first started doing this, it was relatively commonplace that you would be working till 2, 3 a.m. in the build up to a pitch. And I think that has a real toll on you mentally when you're that tired, that exhausted, and you literally have nothing left. I remember vividly, working at Dentsu especially, we would be burning the candle at literally both ends. So finishing at 3, coming in at sort of 8 o'clock to then pick it up again. And you know what? The reality of that stuff was we were probably trying to do too much. We were probably too disorganized. And the toll was taken on the individuals to do that because we didn't make the right choices and we probably didn't plan it enough. I think what I've seen change has been we are now much more realistic about what we want to put in front of a client in order to try and win it, what it takes to put that together, the toll on people, and just trying to limit that burn. And like I said at the beginning, right, there's a tangible reason for that is you need the people who are putting it together to be on their A game in the room. They're not going to be at their A game in the room if they were up till 3 a.m. putting it together the day before. So yeah, I think during there's definitely a pre, during, post pitch take on this stuff, but I think during the pitch that's been the biggest change for me, and I think we've made that change because of performance. It's as simple as that.
What's the impact been? So I'm curious if you could paint the picture a little bit more actually of what it's like to be at work at 2 a.m. working on a pitch, which is a few days away. I'd be very interested to hear a little bit more about that experience or one of them. And then follow-up question after that would be about the difference now and what impact that's having.
I think that the biggest change has been technology. It's been one of the biggest, actually. I think back to the days where we were all sat together at 3 a.m. in an office. A lot of the time we were crowded around a wall of something or other. So we were looking at assets. We were looking at an expression of an idea, expression of a platform, whatever it would be. And we were sat there because, frankly, the most senior person in the room hadn't signed it off yet. And what you don't want to do is lose half the team at that time of the night when, you don't have loads of time left before it's been effectively signed off, before it's got to the point where it's as good as it possibly can be. I think COVID was a real turning point in technology, but I think there was a turning point in the way that people used technology as well. So it wasn't just the fact that it was there, because it was there before. It was the utility of it forced us to work remotely and do a lot of that stuff that we insisted on doing in person before separately. So from my perspective, and you think my role in the pitch a lot of the time, I'm like the casting director. I'm working out where people need to be and what needs to happen, whilst at the same time not really working actively on much of it at all. So my priority was always to limit the burn on people so that they perform well the next day. But at the same time, those people needed to do the work to get it over the line. Now I'm in a position where we can be working on a pitch and people can be gone in relatively normal time to then come back online later to be able to look at something, sign something off, tweak something. And I think the technology's meant that it's much more efficient as a result. So yeah, that's been the biggest change, I think. But yeah, back to your question on what people are up to at 3 a.m. in the morning, it's a lot of wasted time, if I'm honest, is what it used to be. It was a lot of sitting around, a lot of wasted time, a lot of waiting for something else to happen so that your thing could then follow it. And that's the joy of technology sometimes, is that it will create efficiencies in that process, and that's what it's done.
So that's, thankfully, it sounds like something that is in the past for yourself. I'm sure it still happens though, and I'm sure that technology doesn't save the day in all instances. So what kind of impact are you seeing at the moment when it comes to the improvements you've seen? What kind of impact are you seeing that have in terms of maybe a win rate with regards to pitches, but also if we broaden it out a little bit more, just at work and in life, like what are the positives?
The big positive is people don't resent pitching as much as I think they probably did when I was first doing this, because I think the undertaking is probably not as significant, and the burn on your everyday life is not as significant, right? And also, there is a generational thing here as well. The younger generation coming up through do not have the same need and desire to be at work the entire time, to put it politely, and so we are much more cognizant of that and responding to what our talent wants and needs. But also, I think the way we're using technology now means that we are able to juggle that in a way that works for everybody, and so I think that's been really positive. There also isn't this, and what you used to find when you were doing quite big pitches, especially multinational pitches where you were working across lots of time zones, was that you would have this almost, I think the word burnout is often overused, but you would have a period of time afterwards where you just needed to recover. Whereas I think people bounce back much more quickly now, because the burn on their resilience tank, for want of a better phrase, they're not drawing down as much. Whereas there was definitely a time where every pitch you would get the tank to zero and then have to take a bit of time back. I think there are some downsides as well, though, and I think the pitches when you were and like, I know we've moved on. Thankfully, we've moved on from it, but the camaraderie that we built through having those teams who were spending intense periods of time together was actually really good for the business too. Like, you would build bonds with people at those times in the morning that you just couldn't do at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. And those bonds would then mean you were a much more cohesive team. And I mean, we're in the business of chemistry, right? So when you're in a room with a new client and the team get on with each other, that is a massive plus. And so now we're not spending as much intense time together. That chemistry has, it is harder to build, and we have to find new ways of doing it. So yeah, I think it's come with pros and cons, but I think there's probably mostly pros.
That is fascinating, though. If we just pick up on the point you've made around a kind of generational piece, I like the pre, during, and post breakdown of things, and then you finished with the camaraderie that you can't really create at 10 on a Tuesday rather than at 2 a.m. job. And I've been not at Engine or in Inefit, thankfully, but I've been in the office at 2 a.m. and I've been at a printer, and I've been with two colleagues, and I've printed off and bound copies of a deck, which 75% of which doesn't get read. So I feel the pain on that one. I'm interested there if we can dig into the culture side of things now a little bit more, like Gen Z, like connecting with different generations through the organization, managers, senior leaders, and also remote work as well. Where do you sense, whether it's Beyond Collective, previous roles, or just talking to friends more broadly in the industry, what's your sense for where that camaraderie and team cohesiveness is right now?
I mean, I think it's still there. And I look at where I'm at the moment. I think there's an amazing culture. So the Beyond Collective has an amazing culture and is very clear on, simple stuff like you've got each other's backs and that everybody wants to do a good job, not because you're told to, but because you don't want to let people down. And I think that definitely still remains. There is not a generational divide in that. You still want to, do good work for your colleagues, still want to do it for your mates. I think it's harder to build when you spend less time together. There is absolutely no doubt about that in my mind. And so that's what we try. We try to create moments where we can bring the team together to bond and form those less formal connections. Don't get me wrong, this stuff is really hard in a hybrid working environment as well. And I think that massively compounds this. And I don't need to go down that rabbit hole because it's talked about so much, how many days in the office versus not. But the hybrid situation, whilst being really good, and I'm a working parent, so it is exceptionally good for me. But I think when you are at that stage of your career and you are spending 2 days a week at home, you're not having that informal time with people that are more senior. I think it is unquestionable that you are not absorbing as much useful information and, knowledge that you might have done in previous times before. But I do think like there's a whole bunch of reasons why we're doing that. I mean, the cost of rent in central London, not even like it often doesn't even get talked about, but there is a huge cost of getting into work. So I have huge empathy for the reasons that people don't come in 5 days a week and all that sort of stuff. But it is on us as business leaders to come up with ways to help impart that knowledge, because the better our people are, the better work they're going to do, the more successful we're going to be. I don't think anyone's nailing it at the moment, that whole topic. But yeah, there are differences between, back to your original questions, there are differences between the generations from my experience in their attitudes to work. But there are also big differences in the time we're living in now compared to previous times and previous generations. And I think we have to be cognizant of that. So yeah, I see a lot of myself in a lot of the young people that are coming up through now, to be honest with you.
Well, I'm sure there's quite a lot we could go down, and we probably don't have time for all of it, but I'm interested in the similarities and also some of the differences too, if we could dig into that, because I was recently reading research, the all-in census actually, I think it said that 26% of people in the industry plan to leave within the next 12 months. And there's other great data from NABS looking at the percentage of people that have felt overwhelmed in the marketing industry is around 58%, I think. So I think if a lot of people are planning to leave their job in the next 12 months, there's obviously something going on there. And I'd be interested to take a bit of a deep dive into the generational side of that, because yes, from the one hand, we want people to come into the office and be part of the team. And the more time we spend together, the more cohesive we're going to be. The flip side of that is obviously if I'm a junior account exec and I'm not on a massive salary, rent in London is prohibitive, travel into London is prohibitive. So if we can't get to a place where we want 3 days for everyone in the office or 4 days, I think the recent research shows from NABS this might well be, or the Marketing Week research that came out, I think the average is 2.6. So if we kind of park that as a bit of a fixed piece for now, what are some of the other similarities and differences that we might want to lean into and recognize in order to create that culture?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? I think so there's two sides to this for me. I think we can do it at a macro level, and I think we can think about some of the key. I mean, I do a lot of work with the IPA, for example, right? So we have key initiatives like the Pitch Positive Pledge, which is a program which is designed to make pitching better and basically decrease the friction of pitching on people who work in agencies. And it's basically saying there's a lot of wasted work that happens. Ask more questions, qualify stuff through. Maybe you don't need to go for every single pitch, but it gives you a framework to be able to do that stuff better. I think that's really, really good. You've got the People First Promise, which is, again, it's an idea. The whole idea of the People First Promise is that you sign up as an agency and you make commitments to helping your team boost resilience and putting frameworks in place that you're tracking the mental health of your team. So it's another macro level policy. But I do think the individual often gets overlooked. And I think everyone's own individual situation is and can be slightly different. And I think there is a job as line managers to be able to understand the people that you work with, their needs, and being flexible in your approach to it. And so whether that's, for example, Lucy on my team is heavily pregnant at the moment, has one child already. We have a very flexible arrangement when it comes to coming into the office because she needs that. And I know that if I give her flexibility in terms of when she's able to come to the office or not, she performs way better. And I think there are simple ways and simple solutions as line managers that we can put in place with individuals. And I do think that is where the world's gone now. I think it's the generation coming up through now are looking for managers to manage them as individuals with their own individual needs, rather than simply adhering to a policy. And whilst policies and frameworks, I think, are really good to make sure that you are at a headline level doing what you need to do, it is that individual stuff that is so important.
What other examples have you got, Ollie, in terms of that line manager piece? And obviously you're in a senior leadership position as well. So I'll follow up with a question around setting the tone from the top. But from a line manager point of view, it's definitely the case that we speak to people that are squeezed from both sides. There's a lot of expectation, haven't necessarily had any mental health training to actually create the skill or competence to have conversations or signpost effectively. But when it comes to mental health, performance, and just creating that positive culture where people want to turn up to work, what are the types of things that have worked for you or you've seen work for your colleagues?
For me, it is communication above everything else. So it's being really clear of your expectations. It's simple stuff like people having a job spec. Now, I can't tell you the number of times in my career I've started a job and they've gone, we'll just sort of write it as we go. What the business needs is what you do. Now, that is not good for mental health. I can tell you that. Just being around.
Why not?
Because I think you are in a constant state of not knowing whether you are performing at the level you need to perform to. And so you have a constant there's a constant state of anxiety, almost a constant fight or flight, cortisol. How are you ever going to get to everything if everything's your job? So I think there is a communication, very, very clear expectations. I think people being really clear about what they are, accountable for, responsible for, and which parts they're reporting to somebody else. And then I think you need to get into a cycle of just constantly reviewing that. And I think good line managers have a relationship with the people that work for them where they are able to impart the difficult feedback and they're able to say the things they need to say in order to tweak performance as they go. But it is informal enough so that you are able to have that constant connection and constant communication, almost a little and often. I think I found when I first started working, business was much, much more hierarchical than it is now. And I think the fact that we've flattened hierarchy in a lot of organizations now, even if maybe we've not flattened it in terms of job titles, but the style of management, I think has been a really good thing. And I think if you then let that flatter hierarchy reflect in the way that you line manage, then I think you'll be onto quite a good thing.
I love that. Thanks, Ollie. If we take a step back, then looking at the industry as a whole, if we say that survive is like your level one, and it's where burnout is high, retention is low, performance is low. And 5 is where performance is high and sustainable critically. Burnout just doesn't exist, and retention is high because people want to turn up, hang out with their team, make good stuff happen. Where do you see the industry overall right now on that continuum?
It kills me to even say this as an eternal optimist, but it's about 3 is where we're at right now. And I think we've come down quite sharply from a 4 or a 5. I think it's that some of this stuff is symptomatic just of the market we're in. And I hate to blame stuff on that, because I think there are definitely some structural issues in the way that we do stuff as an industry at headline level. But I do think the market has been very hard, and the market is hard because it's being disrupted, is the reality of it. That there are the way that agencies have been structured traditionally, especially creative agencies, around decent sized retained pieces of business that effectively power the profitability of everything and create fat in the system. So they create just space to be able to do stuff. Those accounts have diminished, and most creative businesses now operate on a project basis. And so you are pitching more. The size of the opportunity is smaller. The margin is smaller. And I think that is then that pressure gets passed down to people, because effectively they just need to do more. And I think that's the challenge has been we've just tried to keep the same size machine doing the same thing, but with less fuel going into it. And especially on my part of the business, right, on pitching, the shape of pitches has remained largely the same, especially on creative. So the amount you need to deliver to win something has remained largely the same, even though it's smaller, even though it's less profitable, all that sort of thing. And so, and don't get me wrong, this is changing, right? So I think it's got better, and it will continue to get better, but I don't think we're there yet. I think we are still operating a retainer-based model in a project-based world where the volume of opportunity is lower. And so yeah, I think that's probably where a lot of the problems are caused, in that we are not reflecting the market in the way that we're operating. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think it's that tension which always comes up, isn't it, between agency and client, whether it's a pitch or whether it's work going over scope and just pushing to that next level whilst the client has already got what has been scoped out. So I think I'd be interested to pick up the thread again on the pitch pledge you mentioned before, and frameworks around how to do that well, because it's just another tangible example, I think, of how the positive progress that you mentioned is actually happening right now.
Yeah, definitely. So I don't know how much you know about the pitch positive pledge, but it's a scheme which effectively is just tries to keep the exhilaration and the positive side of pitching in place, whilst acting immediately to try and just take some of the pressure off people. So effectively it's going, how do you increase mental health during the pitch process? So how do you don't burn people till 3 a.m. Don't pitch something the day before a bank holiday, or present on the day after a bank holiday, or the first 3 days after Christmas. So decrease the burn on people, make it better for everybody, and there's less wastage. So when you're pitching ideas, and client, by the way, clients sign up to this as well. So clients and agencies sign up. So the pledges, and the idea with the pledge in terms of wastage is when you're asking an agency to present back on something, a particular set of ideas, make sure that there's at least amount of wastage as possible. So make sure that the task you're asking them to complete is commensurate with the prize at the end, but that it is a realistic amount of work given the amount of time and given what they're able to do. Also, profitability, and it comes back to that point about the industry. It's going decrease the costs, the hard costs, and the number of hours that are spent on a pitch, because otherwise what you end up with is this sort of doom loop where your cost of sale is really, really high consistently. Therefore, when you win the client and bring it through, there's actually not there's no slack in the system afterwards. But anyone that signs up, the idea is that you are demonstrating your intentions to basically initiate change. And so you're putting a stake in the ground and going, we will stick by the conventions that we've set out here. I mean, and some of the signatories, I mean, there's some of the biggest agencies, some of the biggest brands around at the moment. Now, it's not perfect. At the moment, we're working on the second sort of iteration of what the pledge could potentially be. But it's been great seeing the take up on it because it just shows there's an appetite to do things differently.
So yeah, that's so interesting. So if we go back to the point about being roughly around a 3 and actually having been a little bit closer to a 4, but there's obviously a lot going on at the moment. What role do senior leaders have to play in getting us back up to that 4 out of 5, for example? And I'm interested particularly in your thoughts, given your role as CMO at the moment, the fact that you've worked with a lot of senior people. So what role do senior leaders have to build from that survive to thrive space?
Do you know what? And I don't know if this is going to be a particularly popular answer, is we need to build resilience in our leaders, and because they are subject to the same pressures as everybody else. And I do think when you see that pressure being passed down a lot of the time, I think it's because the leadership hasn't got a lot left as well. And I think there's a big, that this, one of the main reasons is I don't think we ever had proper training. Certainly my generation, I mean, I'm 41 now, right? I don't think we had proper training when we were coming up through the ranks on maintaining our own mental health and coming up through and doing that. And I think senior leaders, especially on winning new business, acquiring new business and agencies, they are the point people on it. And don't get me wrong, there is a huge team of people behind it, right? But in a small independent shop like where the one I'm in at the moment, the leadership is doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and they are going from pitch to pitch to pitch to pitch. And I don't think you can make good decisions. And I mean, you're the quarterback, right? When you're leading a pitch like that, you're the quarterback, right? You can't make good decisions if the tank is empty. And if you go from one pitch to the next, your default position is it's probably going to look a lot like the last one. And I don't think that is how you win stuff. So I think there's a massive job to be done on teaching leaders, not just about building resilience in their own teams, but how they can do it themselves. And remembering that this wasn't so much of a focus issue when a lot of us were cutting our teeth and coming up through the ranks. So I would say that's a major factor in a lot of that. But I do think as well, I mean, I've touched on it already, but this understanding that mental health is an individual as well as a sort of a macro level thing, and getting to know your team, understanding how your team tick, and understanding what those people need in order to perform, I think is really important. We do something here called Strengths Finders, which is actually a really useful exercise when people come through the door, which is just understanding how their super strengths. I mean, and the great thing about it is it's all framed in a positive. So how are their super strengths assets, and how do you really extract massive value out of the strengths they have? But also, how does their personality type and their strengths interact with other people, and how do other people work with them? And you can start planning it out and say, it's super relevant to me. I'm the casting director, right? I need to know, not only is that person going to be compatible with the client I'm putting in front of, but are they going to be compatible with the team around them? Again, it's an individual approach to this stuff, which I think is so deeply important, rather than simply relying on some big piece of industry research and then trying to enact something that applies to everybody.
Yeah, I love it. So coming back to individual again, communication again. Really interesting, actually, that you went for the self-care route. Those are my words, obviously, but we quite often talk about 3 things when it comes to managers leading on mental health. One is human care, so basic communication and caring, like it's caring out loud is sometimes how we describe it. The second piece is duty of care. So obviously there's a responsibility there in crisis situations, for example, and from the business. And then the third, and the one that often gets forgotten, which you started with, is the self-care piece and role modeling those behaviors. So I think really cool that you started there. And I like the point as well about having the industry frameworks and macro level stuff, which is great. And there's some really good research actually from NABS about essentially the shortage of support for managers in this space. And I also think stats around 60% of managers, when they stepped into the new role, their direct reports actually saw that they were under pressure in that moment. So I'd encourage people to go and read those stats if you get a moment. Yeah, but really. I think that we've covered a lot of ground. We've covered team culture, communication, individual macro level frameworks, pitching. So thank you so much for all of your insight. If we could round things off with a more personal thought or reflection, if there's one resource, tool, book, podcast, whatever it might be, if there was one thing that's really helped you boost your mental health and performance over the years that you'd recommend others take a look at, what would it be?
Oh, to boost my own mental health. Do you know what? I've got two answers to this. There's a really great book which has that really helped me quite a lot with my job. And if anyone's in a similar job to me, in terms of understanding team dynamics, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni, I think his name, I think I pronounce his surname, is a brilliant, brilliant book. And I think the core message in that, one of the core messages in that, which I always take wherever I go, is about vulnerability. And as a team of people, being able to be vulnerable with each other and embracing that and understanding that when someone's vulnerable, you're able to then work out where their strengths end and your strengths can help either compensate or complement, I think is a humongous skill, both in terms of EQ, but also when you do my sort of thing, I think is really important. The personal side, I honestly, the best thing I ever did, again, I learnt this in COVID, was finding time to myself where I just walk. And I know this is a really, really boring answer, but there is nothing that takes the pressure out of my system like just going for a walk. And I do it religiously when I work from home. I'll go out for 40 minutes whenever I work from home.
So proper walk.
Yeah, and probably stick on a podcast. Do you know what? Maybe towards the end, I might make a phone call to somebody else if I absolutely have to on the way back. But the fact I'm out, I'm seeing something else, my brain is doing something other than just sitting at a laptop, I think is the best thing I've ever discovered when it comes to work. Yeah. And I think, especially as you go through your career, the further up you get, the more pressure you're under. Alleviating that pressure through, gosh, just even if it's just being out in nature, getting some sun in your eyes. I mean, it's second to none.
It's the basics, isn't it? Sometimes.
Oh, totally, mate. Read a good book and go for a nice walk. There you go. I'll leave you with that.
Exactly. Job done. No, thanks so much, Ollie. That was awesome. Really appreciate it. And I think on that note, we should both get out for a little walk in the sun.
Nice one, mate. All right. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you so much. I hope that conversation resonated and it sparked perhaps a new thought or idea around how to manage your own mental health, support your team, or drive performance. If it did resonate, by all means, reach out, get in touch, share it with someone else you think might find it helpful. And if you want to share your own perspectives on mental health and performance with us, then please do drop us a message. Thank you so much.